The sky was dark and full of heavy clouds. Rain poured down like a waterfall, hitting the streets and making tiny rivers on the sidewalk. People hurried along, holding umbrellas or pulling up their coats to stay dry. Cars splashed through puddles, their headlights glowing through the mist. In the middle of all this, a man walked alone with his hood pulled low over his face. He wore a plain sweatshirt and jeans. His shoes were a little muddy from walking without a car or any help. No one noticed him. He looked like just another person trying to get home. But this man was not just anyone. He was the president. He had decided to visit one of his own restaurants without telling anyone. It was not the biggest one. It did not have gold signs or shining windows, but it was special to him. He remembered opening it years ago when he was still working hard every day, trying to prove himself. Now that he was the leader of the country, people treated him differently. Everyone smiled at him, agreed with him, and tried to please him. He wanted to see what was real. He stepped inside the restaurant and shook off the rain. The warm air hit his face, and the smell of fresh bread and hot soup filled the air. The lights inside were soft and golden. There were small tables with candles, and music played gently in the background. People were laughing and talking. The servers moved quickly, carrying plates and glasses. Everything looked perfect at first. The president took a seat near the back, close to a large plant that partly hid him. He did not speak to anyone except to order water and a small dinner. The young man who served him smiled politely and walked away quickly. No one seemed to recognize who he was. That was good. He wanted to watch and listen. As he waited for his food, he looked around the room. The customers were happy. The front servers joked and smiled. The chefs in the open kitchen moved like dancers, placing food on plates with care. But something did not feel right. He could not say what it was yet, but it was there, a tight feeling in his chest, like when something is wrong, even if it looks fine on the outside. He heard a plate crash in the kitchen. Then he saw one of the servers rush out, holding back tears. She walked fast down the hallway near the service door, wiping her face with her sleeve. No one followed her. No one said anything. It was like she had vanished into the shadows. The president looked around. Everyone else went back to what they were doing. A few staff members glanced at each other, then looked away. He slowly stood up and walked quietly down the hall. His shoes made soft sounds on the floor. He turned a corner and found her. She sat on a plastic crate near the back door. Her apron was dirty from work. Her eyes were red. She looked like she wanted to scream but had no voice left. The hallway was cold and smelled like wet shoes and cleaning soap. The president stayed a few feet away. He did not want to scare her. He spoke gently. "Are you okay?" She jumped a little. She had not seen him. She wiped her face and tried to smile, but it broke in the middle. "Yes, I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just tired. Long day." He sat on another crate near her, pretending to be just a kind stranger. "I heard you crying," he said. "I don't think it was just about being tired." She looked down. Her hands twisted her apron. She was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble," he replied. "Sometimes talking helps. You don't have to tell me everything. Just what you want." She took a deep breath. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Some of the other workers are mean to me. They say things when no one is listening. They laugh at me when I turn around. They think I'm stupid. One of them even messed up an order and blamed me. I tried to tell the manager, but he told me not to make it about race. He said I was being too sensitive." The president felt anger rise inside him, but he stayed calm. His eyes stayed on hers. "How long has this been happening?" She looked away again. "Since I started. It's not loud. It's quiet, like whispers, but it hurts just the same. They make fun of my hair. They act like I don't belong here, like I'm lucky to even have a job." Her voice cracked. She covered her face with her hands. The president sat there, still and silent. The rain outside tapped on the back door. For a moment it was the only sound. Finally he stood up. She looked up at him, her face unsure. "You don't deserve that," he said. "No one does." She nodded slowly. She didn't believe him yet. Not fully. But maybe a small part of her wanted to. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a napkin. On it, he wrote something. He folded it and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "A promise," he said. Then he walked away, leaving her in the hallway with the sound of the rain and the napkin in her hand. The note said, "They won't get away with it. Stay strong." She held it like a treasure. She didn't know who he was. Not yet. But something had just changed. And the rain kept falling. The next morning, the sun peeked through soft clouds like it was trying to smile after crying all night. The streets were still wet, but the rain had stopped. Birds chirped on rooftops and the wind was gentle. People were busy again, walking, talking, going to work, or drinking their morning coffee. But in one quiet hotel room not far from the restaurant, the president was already awake. He sat by the window in a chair that felt too soft, holding a small notebook in his hands. The notebook was simple and black, with the edges a little worn. Inside, he had written only a few things. Notes, questions, a name he did not know. He could still see her face in his mind. The server from the night before. The way her eyes held back tears. The way her voice broke but still spoke the truth. He remembered the quiet pain in the hallway and the way she had thanked him for listening even though she did not know who he was. He closed the notebook and stood up. He did not want to wait any longer. He needed to know more. He needed to see it for himself again. This time he would watch carefully. He would stay longer. And he would not just listen with his ears. He would listen with his eyes. He changed into simple clothes again. A dark hoodie, plain sneakers, no guards, no cameras, just a man going to eat, a man with a secret, a man with a purpose. When he walked into the restaurant later that day, the lunch crowd was starting to fill in. The lights were brighter now. The music was a little louder, a little happier. People smiled as they walked in. The host greeted guests at the door. The servers moved with trays and menus, speaking in kind voices to the customers. Everything looked just as it should. But the president knew better now. He did not sit near the back this time. He sat closer to the center where he could see more of the room. He kept his eyes open. He watched who was talking to who avoided who rolled their eyes when someone turned their back. After a few minutes, he spotted her. The same server from the night before. Her apron was clean today. Her smile was soft but small. She moved quickly from table to table, doing her best to keep up. She said thank you, and I'll be right back again and again. She was kind, careful, quiet. Then he saw something else. Two other servers stood near the drink station. They were laughing, but not in a nice way. One of them leaned over and whispered something, and they both turned their heads toward the girl. They laughed harder. The president could not hear what they said, but he saw the way her shoulders stiffened when she walked by. She had heard it. She just did not stop to respond. As she passed them, one of the laughing servers accidentally knocked over a glass of water onto the tray she was carrying. Water splashed on her apron and ran down her hand. She gasped softly, but she did not yell. She did not even frown. She just turned quickly to clean it up. The two others chuckled behind her and walked away like nothing happened. The president took out his phone and slowly placed it under the table. He pressed record. If he was going to stop this, he needed proof. Real proof. Not just words. He watched quietly and kept filming. Later, another moment made him sit straighter in his chair. A table near him called for help because their food was wrong. The server who had taken the order said he had not touched that table. He pointed to the girl. He said she must have switched the plates. The manager walked over. He looked tired. He looked bored. The girl tried to explain, but the manager cut her off. He said, "Just fix it and move on." He did not ask questions. He did not care. He acted like she was a problem, like she was too much trouble. The president's fingers curled into fists under the table. His heart beat faster. He knew now. This was not just one bad night. This was a pattern. This was something ugly that had been growing behind smiles and polished silverware. He stayed until the restaurant started to slow down. As people left and tables were cleaned, He walked out the back exit and stood by the alley where the trash bins were. A few minutes later, she came out with a bag of garbage. She was breathing hard like she had been holding something inside all day. He waited until she saw him. She looked surprised. "You came back," she said. "I did," he replied. "I said I would." She looked at him carefully. "Why? I mean, people don't usually care this much." "Sometimes people pretend not to see," he said. "Sometimes they forget that silence helps the wrong side." She nodded slowly. "I keep thinking it's me. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I should just quit." He looked her in the eyes. "No, it's not you. I saw everything. You were right. And you're not alone." Her eyes began to fill again. But this time, it was not just sadness. It was something else. A small spark of hope. Like a match had been lit inside her after sitting in the dark too long. "Who are you really?" she asked. The president smiled, but said nothing. He reached into his pocket again. This time he handed her a small card. "Just a phone number. No name. No title. If anything else happens," he said, "call this, day or night. Someone will answer." She held the card like it was made of gold. She looked at him again, this time with more questions than answers. But she didn't ask them yet. She just said, "Thank you." He nodded and walked away. As he turned the corner and disappeared into the street, the sun broke through the clouds above. It warmed the sidewalk and touched the windows of the restaurant. Inside, people were still eating, still smiling, still unaware. But something was changing, something big, and it had started with one voice, behind one apron, in one hallway, and the world would soon feel it. The city was alive with the sounds of evening. Cars moved slowly through glowing traffic lights. People walked under street lamps, their shadows stretching across the pavement. Restaurants filled with hungry guests. Laughter floated out of windows. The wind carried the scent of grilled food and fresh bread. Inside one of those restaurants, something quiet but powerful was about to happen. Not everyone would notice it. Some might not see anything different. But one man did, and he was watching. The president returned once again. This time it was dinner service, the busiest part of the day. The restaurant buzzed like a beehive. Servers moved like clockwork. Cooks shouted out times. Dishes clanged in the kitchen. Glasses clinked on tables. Every chair was taken. People talked loudly and leaned in close to each other, trying to hear over the music and noise. The president stepped inside without anyone knowing who he really was. He wore a simple jacket and old shoes. He smiled at the host, who barely looked up from the guest list. The host pointed to a small table near the kitchen entrance and told him to wait. He sat down quietly and looked around. Every part of him was focused. His eyes followed the servers. His ears picked up their words. He wanted to see everything that others ignored. After a few minutes, he saw her again. The young server with the quiet voice and the strong heart. She was carrying plates that were almost too hot to touch. Her steps were fast but careful. Her face was calm, but her eyes were tired. Tired in a way that did not come from work alone. Tired in a way that came from trying to prove your worth over and over while others tried to tear it away. Then he saw the other two servers. The ones who laughed when no one else was listening. One of them leaned against the counter, pretending to be tired, but not lifting a finger to help. The other one was messing with the silverware, putting the forks in the wrong place on purpose, then laughing when the young server had to fix it. The president kept his phone in his hand under the table. He had already pressed record. Every word, every glance, every cruel trick. He would capture it all. A woman at a table near the window raised her hand. She had been waiting too long. Her soup was cold. The server who had taken her order walked by, pointed at the young girl, and shrugged. She hurried over with an apology, even though it had not been her table. She took the dish back to the kitchen and brought out a fresh one with a smile. The woman nodded and said thank you. She did not know that the girl had not made the mistake. She did not know that the girl had been set up again. Later, a glass broke in the back. The sound was sharp and sudden. Everyone looked over. One of the troublemaking servers turned to the manager and said, in a loud voice, She dropped another one. The manager sighed and walked over. His voice was low but cold. Again? That's coming out of your paycheck. The girl opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her hands were shaking. She had not dropped it. She had not even touched it. The president saw the truth. One of the other servers had dropped it, then blamed her without blinking. The manager did not ask questions. He did not look for the truth. He just believed the lie. The president took a deep breath. His heart beat faster. He was no longer just watching. He was feeling it. The unfairness. The pain. The quiet power of cruelty when no one is brave enough to stop it. After a while, the service slowed. The big rush was over. The room was quieter now. The lights were softer. The music was still playing, but gently. People sipped their drinks and finished their desserts. The president asked for the check. He paid in cash and left a tip that was bigger than the bill. But before he left, he walked over to the young server. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. She looked surprised. She nodded. "You were kind. You were patient. And I saw how hard you worked." She smiled a little. "Thank you. Not many people notice." He leaned closer. "I did. And you're not alone. Not anymore." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He placed it in her hand and walked out the door. She looked down at it. Her fingers touched the edge of the paper. Inside was a second note, written in the same simple handwriting as before. It said, "You did nothing wrong. I am watching. I believe you. I promise this will not be the end." She read it twice. Then she placed it in her apron, close to her heart. As she turned back to the floor, her steps were slower but stronger. Her eyes still carried the weight of the day, but something new had grown inside them. A tiny spark, like the beginning of fire. The president stepped into the night air. The stars were peeking out above the buildings. The air smelled clean. He took a deep breath. He walked to the corner and waited. Soon, a black car pulled up with tinted windows. The door opened. A man stepped out and nodded without saying a word. He opened the back door. The president got in. Inside the car, silence filled the space. But in his mind, the noise from the restaurant still echoed. He opened his phone and looked at the recordings. Every lie, every cruel laugh, every unfair word. He had it all. Tomorrow would not be the same. Tomorrow would be different. Because tomorrow the truth would walk in. Morning broke gently over the city. The sky was the color of soft cotton, brushed with orange and gold. The streets were just beginning to wake up. A few early buses rumbled down quiet roads. Small shops unlocked their doors. The smell of coffee drifted from corners where sleepy workers waited for their first cup. The air felt new, fresh, like something important was about to happen. And something was. Inside a tall glass building near the center of the city, the president sat at a long table in a private room. The windows stretched from the floor to the ceiling. Outside, the world moved on like any other day. Inside, however, today was different. The room was full of people. Not too many, just the ones who mattered most right now. The president's chief of staff sat at one end, flipping through a thick folder. Two quiet advisors typed on laptops. A woman with glasses held a stack of printed notes. Everyone knew this meeting was not like the others. It was not about war. It was not about money. It was not even about politics. It was about truth. The president stood up. He looked around the room and spoke clearly. His voice was calm but firm. There was no shaking in it. No doubt. I have spent the last few days watching what many people miss. I walked into one of my own restaurants as someone unseen. I saw what happens when no one is looking. I saw something that should never happen to anyone. The room stayed silent. No one interrupted. No one looked away. I watched a young black woman get blamed for mistakes she did not make. I saw her insulted quietly by people who smiled in public. I saw her try to stand tall while others tried to make her feel small. I listened. I recorded. I took notes. And now I want to act. He sat down. The air in the room changed. People looked at each other. Some leaned in. One advisor spoke first. "Do we know who the staff are? The ones causing the trouble?" The woman with glasses nodded. We checked security footage from the past week. The president's own videos line up with what we found. There is a pattern of mistreatment. The same people are involved again and again. The chief of staff cleared his throat. This restaurant is part of the president's name. If this story goes public, it could look bad. Reporters might spin it the wrong way. The president leaned forward. I do not care about how it looks. I care about how it feels. I care about what it means. I will not be someone who hides the truth because it is uncomfortable. We tell the truth. We fix what is broken. That is the only way. The room fell silent again. But this time it was the kind of silence that came before something brave. That afternoon, the president returned to the restaurant. But he did not come alone. This time there were cameras. Not too many, just enough. News reporters waited outside with notepads and microphones. Curious people gathered near the sidewalk, whispering to each other. Inside, the staff stood in a line. Managers, servers, kitchen workers, hosts. Some looked nervous. Some tried to smile. A few looked confused. The president entered slowly. He wore the same jacket he had worn the first night. No suit, no tie. Just the same man who had walked in quietly before. He faced the staff and began to speak. I have walked through these doors many times. Sometimes as the owner. Sometimes as a customer. But last week, I walked in as no one at all. I sat at that table near the back. I watched the room. I saw things I did not want to see. He paused. The young server stood near the end of the line. Her hands were still. Her eyes did not blink. She listened with her whole heart. I saw one of you cry alone in the hallway. I saw others laugh behind her back. I saw blame thrown like stones. I saw a kind worker treated like a problem. He turned to face the staff fully. Some of you know exactly what I am talking about. And some of you stood by and said nothing. There was a hush in the room. The kind that makes your breath feel heavy. I will not run from this. I will not allow silence to win. So here is what will happen. He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper. This is a new policy, effective today. Every employee at every level will go through fairness training. Every restaurant manager will be reviewed. And if someone is found to treat another unfairly because of race, background, or anything else, they will no longer work here. He paused again. His voice grew stronger. But it is not just about rules. It is about hearts. It is about standing next to someone instead of looking away. That is how we make something better. He turned to the young server. You were brave enough to keep going. Even when others tried to tear you down. You showed more strength in one shift than most people show in a lifetime. Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time they were not from sadness. They were from something else. From being seen. From being heard. From being believed. The president walked over and placed a pin in her hand. It was a small silver star. The kind they give to someone who has stood tall in hard times. This is not a medal. It is not a prize. It is a thank you. For not giving up. For showing us what we had forgotten. She held it in both hands and nodded. Her lips trembled, but she did not speak. She did not have to. The cameras outside flashed. The reporters wrote quickly. The people in the crowd began to cheer. That night, the restaurant felt different. Not because of the food or the music, but because of the truth that had been spoken. People laughed, but it was real laughter now. People smiled, but it reached their eyes. In the kitchen, even the chefs stood straighter. The staff moved with new energy. The young server walked with a quiet kind of pride. Not loud, not boastful, just strong. Outside, the city glowed in the dark. Streetlights lit the sidewalks. Cars moved like slow stars. And high above, the sky was clear. In one corner of that big city, the truth had come into the light. It had been 1 full week since the truth had stepped into the light. 1 week since the president returned to his restaurant not as the man in charge but as a quiet witness to something deeply wrong. And now something had begun to change. Not just in that one place but far beyond it. Word had spread like morning light across the rooftops. People had watched the video. They had read the story in newspapers and seen clips on their phones. Some had cried. Some had gotten angry. Some had stayed quiet for a while, thinking about their own lives, their own workplaces, and the things they had once seen but ignored. In schools, teachers brought up the story and asked students how they felt. In homes, parents sat with their children and talked about kindness. In office buildings, meetings were held where people looked at each other in a new way and said, "We cannot let this happen here." But in the restaurant where it all began, the changes were not just talk. They were real. The young server came in that morning just like always. Her shoes were tied tightly. Her apron was clean. Her hair was pulled back in a smooth braid. But something about the air felt different. She stepped into the staff room and found something waiting for her. On the wall, just above the clock, was a photo. It was her picture, taken when she had first been hired. Below it was a sign that read, "In honor of the courage to speak when it is hardest. In honor of the strength to stand alone until others stand too. In honor of every voice that deserves to be heard." She stared at it for a long time, not because she wanted attention, not because she wanted to be famous, but because it meant her voice had mattered. It had not been lost in the noise. It had been heard. When she stepped out onto the floor to begin her shift, the manager walked up to her. But this time he did not sigh or look past her. He looked her in the eyes. "I want to say I was wrong," he said. "And I want to do better." She nodded. She did not say anything right away, but her smile said enough. It said maybe change was possible. It said maybe today was not like yesterday. The restaurant filled with customers. Some were new. Some had come because they had read the story and wanted to see the place for themselves. Some brought flowers. Some left notes that simply said thank you. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for speaking out. One older woman left a letter folded neatly inside a napkin. It read, "My grandson is black. He starts his first job next week. Thank you for making the world a little safer for him." The young server read it slowly. She kept the letter in her pocket all day. Later that afternoon, the president returned. This time, he did not sit in the back. He stood near the entrance and looked around. He smiled as he saw the team working together. He nodded at the new posters on the wall about fairness and respect. He watched the staff check in with one another. There were no more whispers behind backs. There were no more quiet tricks meant to hurt. The president walked over to her one last time. "I told you this would not be the end," he said softly. She looked at him and said, "It feels like a new beginning." He placed a hand over his heart. "That is what we all need. A table where everyone belongs." And then, just before he turned to leave, he said something more. "We are going to keep going. We are going to look at every single place under my name. Every kitchen, every back room, every hallway. And we are going to make sure this never happens again." She nodded. "Will people listen?" "They already are," he said. "And more will." One voice leads to another. Outside the restaurant, people were still watching. The story had become something bigger than just one girl or one restaurant or even one president. It had become a mirror, a way for people to look at themselves and ask hard questions. Are we treating people fairly? Are we standing up when we should? Are we making room at the table for everyone? The president gave one final wave before stepping back into his car. As he drove away, the restaurant stayed full. Not just with customers, but with something stronger. A new kind of hope. A new kind of power. The young server returned to work, but this time, she was no longer invisible. She was no longer alone. She was the start of something better. And to everyone reading this right now, to every heart that felt something while following this story, to every person who has seen unfairness and stayed silent, you do not have to stay quiet anymore. You can speak. You can listen. You can change something small today that becomes something big tomorrow. If the story touched your heart, if it opened your eyes, if you believe in kindness and courage and truth, then join us in keeping the story alive. Like this story, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so we can keep building a world where every voice matters, where every person is treated with respect, where the color of your skin never decides your worth. because the table is big enough for all of us, and no one should be left standing in the shadows. Let this be our promise. Let this be our beginning,